Abraham is an impressive guy to me. Abraham's response to the order to kill his own son is, here am I. Abraham, I don't know how you do this, man. How tight must that relationship with God be? It is certainly a relationship that all of us should aspire to. And I think most of us are honest enough to admit that we ain't there yet. But I think the reason it's there for us is so that we have something to work towards. And I want to suggest, and I want to argue this point, that it's not likely that, because you could say, well, maybe he went through all that in his mind. Well, I don't know how likely it is that he went through that in his mind or in his heart, because I really believe the text would have told us that. Because the text will tell us. In the Old Testament, when Job goes through all his stuff, the text tells us all the stuff Job said. Job goes through all his pain and anguish and stuff, and at one point Job says, you know what, I am not going to stop complaining and I will not shut up. It tells us. It just flat out tells us. I think the text would have told us if he went through a lot of that in his heart or in his mind. But Abraham's response to the order God gives him is, here am I. What a man of God. Maybe I don't quite get it, but here am I. Maybe it makes sense to somebody else, but here am I. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but here am I, God. I'm not sure if Sarah and I will survive after we do this, but here am I. It's like whatever it is that you say you want done, I'm here. And I'm here and I will do what you say, not because I understand it, not because I get it, not because it feels good to my flesh, but I'm going to do it because you said it and you have a track record of never lying. Oh, I'm trying to tell somebody what helps to pass these tests of faith is being able to love and trust God beyond your intellectual rationalization. Because some of us do nothing unless we can think it fully through. Well, some of these things you will never be able to think through because your thoughts are not his thoughts and his thoughts are not yours. Does no good to try to figure God out. Does no good to try to see it. Does no good to try to feel it. It won't help you at all. The best way to pass a test of faith is just to rely on the past experience that you already had with God. Now, he's never failed you. He's never left you alone. And he has never lied to you. And guess what? He will never fail you. He will never leave you alone. And he has never lied to you. Whatever you are going through, you have to remember that before this test, there were other tests that apparently you survived, because if you did not survive them, you wouldn't be sitting here today listening to me. That means that whether you want to recognize it or not, whether you want to give God the glory or not, you survived some of the other tests that you've had in your life, and this one you will survive too if you just hold on to God's unchanging hand. God was faithful during your previous trials. And he got you to where you are today. Therefore, somebody ought to be able to thank him. Somebody ought to be able to praise him. Somebody ought to be able to worship him. Somebody ought to be appreciative. Stop focusing on what you're going through today and thank him for what he brought you through yesterday. Because if he brought you through that yesterday, he will keep you today and he will bless you tomorrow. Abraham had a history with God. God kept him when he left the Ur of the Chaldees, didn't even know where he was going. God kept him when his daddy died. God kept him when he lied about his wife in Egypt and could have lost his life. God kept him when he and his nephew Lot weren't getting along. God kept him when his nephew Lot was kidnapped, but he still had to fight back those feelings and go rescue his nephew. God kept him when he fought off all of those different kings. God kept him when him and Sarah messed up with Hagar. God kept him through the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. God kept him when he lied again to Abimelech about his wife. God kept him long enough to see Isaac born. He's got a history with God, and so do you. If you turn around and look in the rearview mirror of your life, you can see that every hill, every mountain, every valley, God was walking with you. God was talking to you. God was holding you. God was keeping you. And if he did all of that, why would he not do it again? That's why the Bible declares that he is the same yesterday, Today, forever. Child of God, if you could just look back. Stop looking at what's going on around you for just a minute. And look back. He kept you when you didn't even want to be kept. He blessed you when you didn't deserve to be blessed. That situation you got yourself into, that was your problem. You did that. That was your fault. And he still kept you anyway. He still extended grace and mercy. I wish I had some help in here. He rescued us even when we didn't even understand the kind of danger we was in. All that stuff we drank, all that stuff we smoked, all those places we went, all them shady characters we hung out with, he kept us. He healed us. Some of us were laying on our backs, tubes in our bodies, and didn't know if we would see another day. And look at you now. He kept you. Some of us were on drugs, lost our natural minds, but look at you. He gave you your mind back. Some of us should have messed up. We should have really lost our families. We shouldn't have no families based on some of the stuff that we did. And God kept the family together. I'm trying to tell you, you got a history with God, whether you want to give him the praise or not. You have a history with God. All I'm saying is that if you recognize your history with him, then you got all you need to pass any future test of faith. If you have history with God, then you also have hope that God will do what he promised. And I'm sure that Abraham just did what God said because he believed that God, who had brought him that far, would never steer him down the wrong path. Abraham gets up early the next morning, determined to be obedient. And that's what I want to do every morning. I want to wake up determined to be obedient. I want to, before my feet hit the floor, I want to tell God, thank you, and I'm determined to be obedient. Whatever you have for me today, just say the word, God, and I'm with it. He saddled his donkey, took 2 young men with him in addition to Isaac, split the wood for the burnt offering, headed out for the place where God told him to go. The Bible says in verse 4 that on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off. He gets to the place, tells the young man to stay with the donkey. Tells the young man that he and Isaac are going yonder to worship. See, his mind is different than ours. He's not thinking, I'm going to kill my son. He's thinking in terms of the burnt offering, I'm going to worship. Some of y'all ain't caught on yet. See, Abraham must have understood that the best time to worship is when you don't understand. The best time to worship is during trying times. That's not the time to stay home. That's the best time to worship. The best time to worship is when you're in the middle of going through something. That's where God is able to speak to you and give you the comfort and assurance that you need to make it on through the test. The best time to worship is when you're going through something. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering, made Isaac carry the wood. He's carrying the wood up, which his father will see him sacrificed upon. Abraham took the fire in one hand, took the knife in another hand. He and Isaac headed on up the mountain. And as they begin to climb, Isaac notices something that's a little out of the ordinary. He's seen his father do burnt offerings before. This time something's a little different. In fact, there's something missing. He says in verse 7, Daddy, I see the fire. Daddy, I see the wood. But where is the lamb? And Abraham says, my son, God will provide the lamb for the burnt offering. Sometimes you got to let go and let God do what he's doing. If it's God's plans, God will make the necessary provisions. Just do what God instructed you to do. Just march around Jericho 7 times, and God will handle the rest. Just lift up your rod and stretch out your hand, and God will take care of the rest. Just give him the 2 fish and 5 loaves, and he will take care of the rest. They get to the place of the sacrifice. Abraham builds the altar, sets all the wood in order, ties up Isaac and lays him on the wood, takes the knife in his hands and is ready to slay his son. But the angel, I said the angel, this is where I've been trying to get to. I said the angel of the Lord called down from heaven and he said, Abraham, oh Abraham, do your son no harm, because I can see that you really fear God. I can see that you really loved me. You are willing to sacrifice your son. Abraham, oh Abraham, you're doing what I want you to do. You're living like I want you to live. We got a love relationship between me and you. Look there behind you. There is a ram caught in the thicket. Abraham, oh Abraham, you got a ram caught by the thicket. I just want to tell somebody, Jesus, I said Jesus, Jesus, he is the angel of the Lord. I said Jesus is the angel. How do I know? Because he'll step in just in the nick of time. How do I know? Because he'll step in just when you need him the most. How do I know? Because he'll step in when you run out of options. How do I know? Because he'll step in when you have nowhere else to turn. How do I know? Because he'll step in when you can't go any further. How do I know? Because he'll step in when you're down to your last dime. How do I know? Because he'll step in and contradict what your doctor just said. How do I know? Because he'll step in when everybody else has turned their backs on you. How do I know? Because he'll step in when you need a helping hand. How do I know? Because he'll step in when you need a comforting voice. How do I know? Because he'll step in when you need an encouraging word. Now maybe somebody listening to me now and you don't quite get it. You say, I'm not convinced that the angel in the story is really Jesus. I'm not sure you did a good enough job making that connection. Maybe somebody is here and you are not convinced that the angel of the Lord is an Old Testament appearance of Jesus Christ. Well, if you read the whole text, Jesus shows up in the middle of the text. A father takes a son whom he loves and declares that he's his only son. That's verse 2. Verse 4, it was the third day when they got near to the sacrifice. Verse 6, the wood for the sacrifice was laid on the son's back. Verse 7 and 8, Isaac is looking for a lamb. Verse 12, the angel says to the father, you have not withheld your only son. Verse 13, a ram is caught in the thicket, and the father uses a substitute, and the substitute is a ram. I'm just telling somebody, Jesus steps in the middle of your crisis. He stepped in then, and he steps in now. Is there anybody? Is there anybody? Is there anybody? Anybody who knows that he'll step in, he'll